As a politician with a notorious reputation, he knew it was only a matter of time before he would be assassinated. Therefore, wherever he went, he was accompanied by 2 cars full of bodyguards and utilized military and police resources to isolate any potential threats. To guard against snipers, he traveled in bulletproof vehicles or stayed indoors. His security team meticulously planned his movements, ensuring he could move from his car indoors within 10 seconds. On this particular day, just as he appeared, the bodyguards looked toward the source of the bullet and could only see a distant high-rise building. Through a high-powered telescope, they barely made out the glint of a sniper scope from within that building. Minutes later, a large contingent of German police arrived at the building. The SWAT team forcefully broke into the suspect's room, only to find a timed bomb under the bed. The German intelligence agency determined the distance of the snipe.
There's been a lot of speculation about the shot. Do you have a confirmed distance?
Yes, indeed. From the apartment block where the shot was taken to the hospital door where Best was hit is 3,815 meters.
Are you sure about that?
The shot was taken from 3,815 meters away, with the bullet taking 6 to 7 seconds to reach its target. This meant the sniper had to predict the target's location and timing accurately. They only captured 2 shots of the killer through surveillance. One was when he left the building 2 minutes and 52 seconds after the shooting. The other was when he was in the office building of the murdered politician last night, disguised as a cleaner. Many people saw him at that time, but no one noticed anything unusual about the cleaner. He even passed through facial recognition security without a hitch, indicating his disguise was flawless enough to deceive technology. Although the killer nearly executed a perfect plan, legends often leave traces. Based on his build and skin color, intelligence agencies across Europe investigated their military personnel, but found no active special forces soldier capable of such a long-distance shot. The British MI6 decided to review records from the past 30 years, investigating top marksmen from sniper schools. However, their findings showed no one could have made such a shot from that distance. It wasn't until an old sniper mentioned a dusty legend that a breakthrough occurred. 10 years earlier, a sniper had died in Afghanistan, and his file had been classified as top secret. This was the story of the Jackal. Let's go back to the day before the shooting. In the home of a low-income worker in Munich, Germany, an elderly cleaner was strangled to death on the sofa in his home. There was wine on the table next to him and a paper plate filled with cigarette butts beside him. A man approached, taking a pack of cigarettes from the janitor's chest pocket and putting it into his own. The 2 men looked identical and were dressed the same. He was the Jackal. The Jackal had been following the janitor for many days, even planting a listening device on him to record his voice. During this time, the Jackal meticulously mimicked the janitor's behavior, and that evening was the night he put his plan into action. He followed the janitor's routine to work, taking public transportation and then walking, even mimicking the number of cigarettes the janitor smoked each day. Before entering the office building, he smoked one last cigarette, just as the janitor always did. The building's large screen displayed a speech by the politician, who, before entering politics, had been a very wealthy capitalist and was now running for Chancellor of Germany. The Jackal rudely extinguished the cigarette butt, not discarding it, but instead stuffing it into his pocket. He entered the company reeking of cigarette smoke, and the bag in his hand was the first variable. With cleaning tools in hand, the Jackal made his way to the floor where the target was located. The place was filled with surveillance cameras, but fortunately, there was only one security guard. The Jackal noticed 2 other people still in the company, the politician's son and his subordinate. He pushed the cart into a room, drew the blinds, turned on the vacuum cleaner, and began assembling his handgun. At that moment, the unexpected happened. The security guard heard the noise and went to check, arriving just as the Jackal was exiting the room. The Jackal locked onto the target's movement trajectory from above. However, in the end, the Jackal did not kill him. A few hours later, the Jackal returned to the safe house, looking at his completely altered face in the mirror, and inexplicably smiled. In these aspects, the Jackal could be considered an artist. His appearance was not that of a fierce-eyed villain, but of a gaunt, haggard man. When he looked at himself, his gaze was filled with sadness. A man like him was destined never to mourn. The Jackal took out his phone and checked the wind forecast for the next morning. Then he began to wait for the arrival of the next day. The assassination of the politician's son was just to lure out the snake, and his father was the real target of the Jackal. This was a critical period in the politician's campaign for Chancellor of Germany. He had originally planned to stay indoors until the results were announced. But after his son was assassinated, public opinion suspected it was retaliation due to his anti-immigration stance. Thus, he had to visit his son in the hospital. Otherwise, it would be extremely detrimental to his election. All these reactions from the politician were anticipated by the Jackal. He had already tidied up the room, removed the glass from the balcony, and set up a small windmill to observe the wind direction. He took out all the clothes from his suitcase and began assembling the sniper rifle. His suitcase was ingeniously designed, with all the gun structures disguised as part of the suitcase. With this suitcase, the Jackal could carry a sniper rifle undetected through various security checks. Before the target arrived, the Jackal had one more thing to do: adjust the scope. He first observed the only building near the hospital. The soldiers on it were busy guarding against the road conditions and chaotic crowds in the distance, so the Jackal decided to take the risk and test the gun. At this distance, the gunshot couldn't be heard over there. Seeing the deviated bullet hole, the Jackal loaded a second bullet. With everything ready, the Jackal began to wait for the target to appear. After successfully eliminating the target, the Jackal skillfully disassembled the gun and quickly but calmly packed his things. He set the bomb and, before leaving, activated the fire alarm. Just 2 minutes and 50 seconds after firing the shot, he reached the ground floor and got into a car he had prepared in advance. He anticipated that the police would focus on the hospital. Even if they rushed quickly, the actual distance they would have to travel would be more than 3,800 meters. During this process, he even passed by a large number of police cars. The route the Jackal chose had many tunnels, which helped him avoid tracking by helicopters. By the time the police reached the building, he had arrived at the parking lot where he had parked his second car. He then detonated the previous car, thus eluding all tracking and erasing all traces. That afternoon, he changed into a suit and went to Nuremberg near Munich. He pretended to be a chess enthusiast and collector and purchased an expensive chess set there. By nightfall, the Jackal reached the German-French border. By then, the police had set up even stricter checkpoints. The Jackal had prepared a fake passport in advance, and the official system already had records of his fake passport. This was part of the infiltration work that an assassin like him had to do regularly. The police checked his car and searched his suitcase. The Jackal deliberately placed an exquisite box on the passenger seat so that the police would focus on this unusual item and overlook what was truly important. Inside the box was an ivory chess set. He claimed he had come to Germany to buy this chess set. Although it was somewhat against the rules, it wasn't the main concern. It was an effective diversion tactic. Ultimately, the police let the Jackal pass. The next day, the Jackal arrived in Paris, France. Although he was safe, he still did not relax because a day had passed and he had not yet received the final payment. At the Lyon train station, he entered an internet cafe. He inserted his hacker USB into a computer, replacing the original operating system. This way, he could erase all traces of his intern. Then he logged into the dark web using the new operating system. This website was where he contacted his client, but there was still no response from the client. The Jackal had no choice but to proactively request the final payment, but the other party asked him to wait. Even a professional assassin could only wait like this. A few hours later, the Jackal couldn't help but ask how much longer he had to wait. The other party replied that the payment would arrive within 24 hours. At this moment, the Jackal received a new task invitation. The other party had heard of the Jackal's reputation and came to find him. The news of his assassination of the German Chancellor candidate had already spread. The Jackal hesitated. Taking frequent orders would bring greater risks, but the other party offered a generous reward, which tempted the Jackal. The other party proposed a meeting, but the Jackal refused. However, the other party directly offered a price of $10 million. Seeing such a generous commission, the Jackal compromised. So he proposed an offline meeting fee of $1 million. The other party needed to pay half of the deposit first, and the other half after the meeting. He stated that both parties could choose not to cooperate afterward. However, the client surprisingly agreed readily. That day, he stayed in the internet cafe until dark. Only after the client paid the meeting fee did he set off and board the train to the agreed location. The Jackal and his clients never met. They only took orders based on each other's reputation. the client had to unconditionally trust him, paying half of the deposit first and the other half after the task was completed. The Jackal had always been able to fulfill his commitments. His transactions with clients were based on his professionalism and mutual anonymous protection. The Jackal set the meeting place with the client in a natural, scenic area in Sweden. There were few people here, but some birds appeared, which the Jackal liked. He would even draw them in his spare time. Soon, the client who was going to meet the Jackal arrived. The Jackal first observed the client's appearance to confirm if he had come alone. It was a woman. Coming alone to meet an assassin was not an easy thing for her, but she seemed to have no choice. She came to the observation hut designated by the Jackal. After a while, the Jackal came in. He walked without making a sound, and the woman didn't hear him come in at all.
Don't turn around. Did you come alone?
Yes, I followed your instructions to the letter.
She could only hear the Jackal's voice, confirming his gender and accent. This was the greatest sincerity the Jackal could offer. Next, the two briefly communicated about this target. The woman's assassination target was one of the most watched figures in the world at that time, Uladog Charles, abbreviated as UDC. As soon as the Jackal heard this name, he asked for a price increase. The original $10 million was absolutely not enough. He wanted 10 times the price and for the client to reimburse all reasonable expenses for the assassination. The woman said she needed to go back and discuss it. Obviously, she was not the decision maker, so the first meeting ended like this. UDC was one of the most controversial tech moguls of his time and one of the wealthiest individuals. In his youth, he founded a company that provided global financial services based on information technology, making a fortune in the finance industry. With 240 million followers on social networks, he was fervently called a god by his devoted followers. Having witnessed numerous evils in the financial sector, he decided to declare war on them. He developed software that claimed to make the sources and destinations of all large-scale global funds transparent. He sought no reward but aimed to usher in an era of financial transparency and global economic justice. Such radical ideals indeed brought UDC to the brink of death. Those who wanted him dead were conservative capitalists from the wealthy elite, led by an elderly man, Timothy Winthorpe. The woman who met with the Jackal was one of his subordinates. The next destination for the Jackal was Cadiz, Spain. Located at the southernmost tip of Western Europe, near the Atlantic Ocean, it was a harbor with a spectacular villa on a small hillside. The Jackal stopped his car, stowed his weapon, and skillfully entered the unguarded gate. Dressed in a sharp suit, he looked like a business elite. By the villa's swimming pool, he saw a woman tidying up toys. After they made eye contact, he seemed to let down all his guard. The woman walked toward the Jackal with a mix of surprise and slight anger, but mostly happiness. She was the Jackal's wife, Nuria. This villa was his property, and when he had no missions, the Jackal lived here. Even at home, he was not one to sleep in. He was out early, just before dawn. The scent of grass, trees, and the ocean helped him forget the bloody and warlike smells. He enjoyed observing birds. Seeing an eagle catching its prey, he, as a killer, found it hard to relate to the eagle. This was a life many envied. As if owning the entire sea with silence all around, he hoped it would bring him peace. His wife was a local, and they had a child, a son with blonde hair like his, untouched by the world's influences. In his wife's eyes, the Jackal was named Charles, a mysterious business elite whose business trips could last 1 or 2 months. During his trips, his phone was always off. He only called home voluntarily, and his family could not reach him by any means. At home, the Jackal was a loving person. His smiles and attention were all for his family. He made gifts for his son with his own hands, pouring his heart into them. When his mother-in-law took photos, the Jackal was extremely vigilant. This was a strange request he had made to his wife long ago. His career was full of secrets, his identity unknown, and they had never met his relatives or friends. However, he was indeed much wealthier than ordinary people, and his wife and child enjoyed the comfortable life his money brought. Nuria only asked that he be fully present with his family when he was at home. However, this was something the Jackal found hard to do at the moment. Alone, he opened his computer. 24 hours had passed, and the final payment had not arrived. He sent another message to the client demanding the final payment. However, from this moment on, all professionalism, decency, and false calm would completely collapse.